Call the Committee of the Whole of July the 24th to order and ask for a motion to adopt the agenda, please. Councillor Cunningham, Councillor Niche. Any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? It is carried. We have two items on the agenda, two delegations. The first is the manager of communications with regards to the municipal website renewal. Manager Stewart, if you know the routine.
Yes, thank you. I'm just going to get it up on the screen here. Actually, I should make sure that I'm screen sharing for these folks. Thank you. All right. So, as you probably are aware, because we had applied for a grant to fund a portion of the website, the city has been working on developing a new website with kind of accessibility and mobility standards in mind. We've had the same website for quite a number of years. It was developed in-house. And so we found a very cost-sensitive way of redeveloping our website. And so we've been pursuing that option for the last couple of months. And the city is now looking to have a new website launched in August. So we thought we would give council a little bit of an advanced preview of that project, as well as some of the benefits and what the website will look like. So why would we redo the city's website? So for one, if you Google Prince Rupert, the city's website is the first thing that comes up. So it's our best face forward that we can provide to people that are looking to either invest in Prince Rupert, visit Prince Rupert, live here, or for existing residents. So it's really important that we have a good, strong web presence. There were some challenges with the existing website because we had lost the person who built it in-house initially. So some of the updating of that site are then challenging because there's less familiarity with web development with existing staff and also just with how they had developed it. So there was just a bit of challenge in terms of updating the current site and some anticipated costs for having to develop the site and get new features and stuff built in going forward. So we looked at finding another way forward that was easier for staff to maintain, and also that incorporated our new city brand. So that was one of the considerations as well, is that we do have a new city brand with new standards and colors and design elements that we'd like to incorporate better into our web presence. I have bolded that this was an opportunity as well to complete the project at a minimal cost. So the cost was $5,000 this year to migrate all of the content over and develop a new site based on a template-based system. And then going forward, there's around $2,500 annual fee for maintenance, web hosting, security, regular updates of mobility and accessibility standards that would otherwise be an in-house capacity and development costs that we might have to outsource if we don't have that capacity in-house. And we should also note that this is one effort among many towards community renewal. And so, the online web presence isn't going to feel like the most important pressing thing, I know, for many people who are looking to the community and saying, we need to revitalize other areas and focus on housing and downtown revitalization, for instance. But this is part of how we package the information that we share about what initiatives that we're doing around those projects. So I'll show you in a minute here, but we've got a better suite of business-focused information on the website now than we had previously. So as I've kind of been mentioning along the way, there are some efficiencies that we're going to be realizing through the new website. So it's a template-based system developed by a Victoria-based company that a lot of other municipalities use. And so because of that, there's cost savings because they don't have to develop a custom site for us, which is why it was a lesser cost. It also means that every time that they update any of those offerings that they have for their website across their platform, it's shared by all of the people who who are using the site, which again, it makes it a cost savings. It isn't any additional cost to us. There are also the opportunity for, there is also the opportunity for other departments to have editing accesses because it's an easier program to use. So that will help other departments, say rec, if they need to update the pool schedule, they don't have to call Veronica or someone in IT to do that. They can do that on their own, which is also an efficiency that we'll realize through this work. And again, there'll be contracted web content management system, backup, hosting, and security updates. So that's a big help and a little bit of a load off of us and of IT. Of course, it's very important that we update the user experience for our website. So it's really important all the time with websites that you keep on top of the mobile compatibility so that when people see a website on your phone, that it looks correct and that things aren't wonky. And so that's something that the system will do for us. There is also an accessibility checker. So every time you develop any content on the page of a website, you can check whether or not it meets accessible standards. There's like a little button to do that, which is really great. And that was one of the things that we were talking about at the accessibility committee, is how to make our website more accessible. So I'm really happy to be able to deliver on that quickly. There is also a translation tool for the website. So you can translate the website into dozens and dozens of different languages, which is a really neat feature that we also think will help people that are moving here that maybe don't have English as a first language. So that's another benefit. Or people that are, looking to invest here that maybe aren't from around here. So one other opportunity is, again, alignment with existing initiatives. The city has a business resource tool that kind of shares information about what the local labor force looks like here, what different development opportunities are here. And that tool might be underutilized because it's not as well embedded into our website as it could be. So one opportunity that we're pursuing through the new website is to better integrate that platform and to make sure that it's front and center and people can access it and kind of understand our community and the opportunities in Prince Rupert a bit better. And again, there's the integration of the brand standards. All right, so I'll stop talking about all of that and show, don't tell, and give you a little preview. Hopefully it will connect. Oops. 1 second. I think I'm just, yeah, there we go. All right, so this is just, oh, thank you. Share. Apologies for the technical difficulties. Just making sure everybody on Zoom can see us. Okay, so this is just a brief overview of what the new landing page will look like. As you can see, it's a little bit lighter. That is an accessibility component. So having a bit more contrast between the colors is one thing that makes the website accessible. And so we've updated our new site to be that standard. Another feature that we have, the boil water notice, is not in effect, but I wanted to illustrate to you that we have a feature at the top of the website. If there's any kind of alert or emergency information or something that we really want to share with the community in a pressing way, you can have that along the top of your screen. Like the website that we have now, there's a spot here to have some featured material. So, property tax payments are due. We've got a call for artists out. That's a good information to feature. Some information on Cow Bay parking, different funding for the fire department. So these are just some news pieces that we had pulled over from the existing website. The new website also has options for people to navigate as a resident, a business, or a visitor. So based on what you click here, you get different information. So residents might be looking for the waste pickup schedule, reporting a bylaw complaint, council agendas and minutes, career opportunities. Those are things that people who live in Prince Rupert will look for. If you're a business, you might be looking for business licenses, some information on the downtown tax exemption program, economic development, and also building and development services. And then for visitors, we've got more information that's targeted towards them. So the airport ferry schedule, tourism resources, those kinds of things. And then we've got our regular news and notices section and information on the council meeting schedule and what's coming up there. And as you can see, this is the language feature that I was talking about. It's right at the top of the page. You can just scroll through and you can see how many different options there are, which I think is a really nice feature about this website. It's appealing for sure. Helps people even who have English as a second language, you know, can have familiarity if they wanted to read our website in their home language. I'm just going to take you to one of the sections that's a little bit more built out. As I mentioned, this is coming live in early August, so it's not quite finished yet. We're still working on some of the tweaks, but there are some sections that are built out a little bit better. So under the building and development section, you can see that we've got information on zoning regulations, permits, finding your property through the GoMap system that will be still integrated into this website as well, which is an existing thing that we have. Information on parking. But we've tried to make it a little bit a nicer layout, easier to find things, and a very searchable site. All right. And again, we still have a link up here to our Rupert Talks platform, which will take you to your engagement platform if people are looking to complete a survey or find out more information about city projects. Okay, let's go back to the PowerPoint. Nope. So a website is never done. I'm anticipating that we will have, you know, some kinks to work out as we launch the new website. And also we're always open to receiving feedback about what we should be having on our website, how we can make it more accessible for folks, improvement. So anybody who wants to reach out to me can always do so by emailing or calling me directly. And like I said, it will be expected in the first 2 weeks of August. That's what we're looking at for a launch of the website. There's usually a week or so where you fiddle with it and make sure that there are no kind of development errors along the way. And we'll be integrating staff and user feedback on an ongoing basis from there. And then that's my presentation complete, unless you have any questions.
Dr. Buchan.
Your Worship, I just want to take a quick moment to commend the work that Ms. Stewart has done here. $5,000 cost, plus some staff time. To have this outsourced for a full rebuild would have been between $150,000 and $250,000. We've been talking about doing this at least for the time that I've been involved with Prince Rupert. And funding's been an issue, but the need to do this has been pressing. So to do this for that cost, shows how staff work really hard to do things with less. And the timing for doing this is remarkably quick too. And bear in mind all the other things that staff do. This is very impressive.
Yeah, I agree. Councillor Randhawa.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for the great work. It's really good. So only question is people can able to if they see something like tree fall or pothole, they take picture and they can instead of calling public works, they can send their concern like that. They have option.
Absolutely. So we're building. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Through the mayor. So we're building some forms into the website for sure, and public works reporting will be one. You can also report through our municipal app currently. So if you've downloaded an app on your smartphone, you can also do reporting that way as well.
Thank you.
Councillor Cunningham.
Thanks, Veronica. It looks like I won't be pestering you as much for information. It's all going to be there. It looks like you've done a great job, and it's really simplified it. I think it's going to be nice to just be able to go on there and actually find things instead of fumbling around like a guy that can't dance across the keyboard. Great job.
Any other comments? Thanks very much. Next up is Urban Systems with the transportation plan. And somebody's going to have to get Brian back. I'm sure he's there.
I'm here. Can you see and hear me?
We can see and hear you, yes.
Great. Hey, I'll try and share my screen here. Should be the right one. Perfect. Are you seeing the slide deck now?
Yes.
Perfect. Well, good evening, Your Worship, and members of council. I'm sorry I'm not here in person tonight, but happy to be here presenting virtually the proposed transportation plan for Prince Rupert, and wanted to give you a brief overview of some key elements of the plan tonight. So I'll start with a very brief overview of what's involved in the transportation plan, some existing conditions about where we are today for transportation in Prince Rupert, visioning directions, where the plan wants to go in terms of a vision and some values, and then walk through just some highlights of the long-term plan and the implementation plan for the transportation plan. So the overall purpose of the transportation plan, this is a long-term strategic plan that will guide transportation and infrastructure priorities over the long term, but really with a focus on actions the city can take over the next 5 to 10 years, so being fairly kind of action-oriented. It involves strategies and actions for improving all modes of transportation, as well as looking at ways to improve connections to other modes of transportation, just recognizing the gateway role that Prince Rupert has for air, water, and rail-based modes of transportation. So there's a number of focus areas in the plan, and in particular 4 kind of key chapters with recommendations in the plan. The first is really looking at modal interconnectivity, so looking at those air, water, road, and rail-based forms of transportation for people to access your community. The second theme is looking at active transportation, so that includes walking and mobility aids, as well as cycling and rolling. We have a chapter on public transportation, which isn't just public transit. Often when we think about public transportation, we're thinking about transit specifically, but this goes beyond that to include school buses, shuttles, taxis, and ride-hailing. And then finally, looking at driving. And that chapter includes not only driving, but also goods movement, parking, and car sharing. So quite a comprehensive suite of improvements and really covering all aspects of how people travel to, from, and within the city. So the process to develop a transportation plan here, which we're calling Connect Rupert, was developed over the past year, just over a year ago since we started. And we worked through these 5 phases of the study process here. After launching the plan, we looked to understand what the current context for transportation was in Prince Rupert and did some community engagement to understand existing conditions. In looking forward, phase 3, we looked to develop a vision and goals to shape the future of transportation in Prince Rupert. In phase 4, that was really coming up with strategies and actions, so kind of the details of how to achieve the vision and values for the plan. And then finally looking at an implementation strategy, identifying short, medium, and long-term priorities, and a phasing strategy to implement the plan. So an important part of this is how this plan integrates and aligns with other initiatives. As you can see here, a number of other strategies, the infrastructure replacement strategy, that's a key piece of the implementation plan for this process, and just recognizing a lot of the priorities could be delivered through other infrastructures projects that need to be undertaken. There's also Rupert Plays, the Parks and Outdoor Recreation Plan, and that has some alignment, particularly thinking about things like trails and parks. And then an interim parking management strategy was developed a few months ago, and we've integrated that as a broader parking strategy into the transportation plan. So I mentioned we've done some community engagement throughout the process. We had 2 rounds of community engagement. The first round took place last summer between June and August, and there were a variety of ways that we reached out to the community through the website, social media, and having posters all over the city. And then we had an online survey with over 300 responses, 2 community pop-up events, which had about 85 participants, and an in-person stakeholder workshop with 13 participants. And then we had a second round of engagement earlier this year in February and March, where we took a draft plan out to the public and wanted to get their feedback on the draft plan. And again, promoted it through the website and social media, had a second online survey with 89 responses, and had another community pop-up event, 23 participants. So overall, several hundred community members were involved at some point throughout the development of the plan. So the overall framework for the plan, this is kind of a placemat outlining some of the key ingredients of the plan. So it has a vision statement, and that's at the top of the graphic on the right. And I'll read that on the next slide as well. And supporting that overarching vision statement, we have 10 values: accessible, equitable, livable, and so forth, as you can see here. And then there's the 4 themes that I mentioned: modal interconnectivity, active transportation, public transportation, and driving. And then underneath each of those themes, there's a number of strategies. We have 29 strategies altogether. And nested underneath each of those strategies are much more specific policy statements to give really clear guidance about how you might achieve each of those strategies. And altogether, there are 83 policy statements within the plan. So starting at the top of that hierarchy, this is the vision statement that we've developed. I won't read through the details of it, but really trying to recognize what makes Prince Rupert unique. In particular, your world-class setting, your port, rapidly growing port, world-class transportation system, and recognizing you're looking to be a vibrant and growing and complete community with a thriving economy where you can attract and retain people. The vision looks to kind of recognize some of the natural features that make Prince Rupert so special: its natural beauty and recreation opportunities, as well as its role of significance to the national transportation system, and really looking at all forms of transportation which converge in Prince Rupert, and is, quite frankly, a really unique aspect of your transportation system. And then looking at how to manage the transportation system to provide connections for people of all ages and abilities within the city, but also connecting to other communities, neighboring and Indigenous communities in the surrounding area. And ultimately, the final paragraph really looking to make sure Prince Rupert's transportation network is safe, sustainable, and resilient, and enables a healthy, accessible, and equitable community. So to support that broad vision statement, the plan has 10 values, which would be kind of similar to goal statements. You can see them on the screen here: accessible, equitable, livable, healthy, safe, efficient, well-connected, economically prosperous, environmentally sustainable, and resilient. And so these values really shape the directions in the plan and are kind of important to consider when you're looking at moving forward with implementing projects. And then getting into some of the strategies and policy statements. As I mentioned, there's quite a few strategies and policy statements. So I'll summarize some of the key strategies for each theme. The first theme was looking at modal interconnectivity. So this is really looking at ways that we can make it easier to get to and from major kind of gateways or points of entry to the city, which we're calling mobility hubs. And those are the orange circles that you can see on the map there. So this is looking at the train station, ferry terminal, docks, things like that, seaplane base, other destinations where people are really accessing the community, and how we can improve the quality of those connections within those transportation hubs, how we can improve access to and from those stations and terminal areas, how we can improve accessibility of travel information. So when people are arriving in the city, they have information about how to get around. And then finally, working with service operators to improve service to and from Prince Rupert by all forms. So this could include working, for example, with airlines to improve airplane connections to and from the city, as well as rail and other service operators. The second theme looks at active transportation. So this is walking, wheeling, cycling, and rolling, all forms of active or human-powered forms of transportation. Quite a few strategies here looking at active transportation. The first one is looking at developing complete streets design standards to ensure streets are designed not just for vehicles, but also for people, and kind of putting people first. The second is looking at building a complete, connected, and accessible sidewalk network. Third, looking at other opportunities to make walking a safe and more enjoyable experience, things like plazas and parks and things like that. Fourth, looking at designing streets and trails to be universally accessible. Fifth, building a cycling and rolling network for people of all ages and abilities. Sixth, enhancing trails and multi-use pathways to provide recreational opportunities. And again, this would be a tie-in to the parallel Rupert Place plan. Seventh, looking at crossing treatment, so making it safer and easier for people to cross major streets and other barriers. 8, looking at what we call quick build approaches to implementing infrastructure using low-cost flexible materials. 9th, to maintain your infrastructure year-round. And then finally, to develop support programs and initiatives that encourage people to use active transportation as the preferred mode for more trips. So really looking beyond just infrastructure, what are some of the other support programs and education initiatives and things like that that can help encourage active transportation. The third theme looks at public transportation. So of course, public transit is provided by BC Transit. So a lot of these strategies involve working with BC Transit to support and advocate for improvements to the transit system. These include things like improving transit service to make it a convenient and reliable transportation option, ensuring the transit network connects to people where they want to go, reducing the need to transfer. Third, improving the transit customer experience with things like more shelters and benches and route information at bus stops. Fourth, looking at improving transit accessibility, so people with mobility aids and other forms of disabilities are able to access the transit system. Fifth, looking at the taxi system and making sure that the supply of taxis matches the demand. Sixth, looking at encouraging ride-hailing options to provide more transportation choices. Seventh, to manage and regulate the curbside to encourage and support ride-hailing and taxis. And then finally, continuing to work with partners to support ways for children and youth to travel to and from school. So looking at kind of continuing the school bus program that you already have and other ways to make it easier for children and youth to travel to and from school. And then finally, we have a theme looking at driving, and this also includes not just driving, but also goods movement and parking. So some of the strategies here are looking at updating the city street network classification to reflect their intended function. And in particular, again, not just thinking about their function for vehicles, but also their function for people walking and cycling and other users. Number 2 is to design and deliver people-first streets. So looking at options or opportunities to reallocate road space to make it more comfortable for people walking and cycling. Third is maintaining the road network and preserving a state of good repair. Fourth, to improve safety for all road users. Fifth, adopting an updated goods movement network. Sixth, looking at kind of new and emerging forms of technology, things like electric vehicles and autonomous vehicles and car sharing, and how to kind of plan for those future trends. And then finally, reviewing parking supply and demand and ensuring that meets the needs of residents, visitors, and businesses. So as you can see, quite a lot in the plan and covers a lot of ground and is quite comprehensive and really trying to think of finding ways to improve all forms of how people travel through the city. It is a long-term plan, so there's quite a lot in the plan, but recognizing we, as I mentioned at the outset, also wanted this to be fairly actionable and looking at what the city could do over the short term and medium term. So that's really looking kind of the next 5 to 10 years. And so we've developed an implementation plan based on an evaluation that we completed that looks at prioritizing all of the strategies and actions into the plan and categorizing them as either short, medium, or long term. And we've also identified the method of implementation. For example, is it a capital infrastructure project? Is it an operations and maintenance initiative? Or is it more of a policy or programming initiative? Or in many cases, it might be a combination of those elements. And we looked at the responsibility. So in many of these cases, it would be the primary responsibility of the city. But for example, looking back at some of those public transit improvements, many of those would kind of lean on BC Transit as being a primary responsibility and the city able to support that. So we've kind of identified what those responsibilities might be, as well as relative cost and resource requirements. And in terms of funding strategies, I mentioned at the outset the infrastructure replacement strategy, and so that's an important lens to thinking about how to leverage opportunities or projects that the city needs to undertake anyway with subsurface utilities. And while those occur, that's a great opportunity then to use those to implement some of the recommendations of the transportation plan. So looking at the recommendations from the infrastructure replacement strategy, identifying priorities from those projects, and we looked at those as we were prioritizing projects through this process as well to make sure that the priorities are integrated between the two plans. And this is just a map showing some of the recommendations that came out of the infrastructure replacement strategy. And some of the corridors in particular that are shown in blue there, we overlaid those with the recommendations from the transportation plan to find those synergies where we could find some co-benefits. And then finally, I mentioned another opportunity is to look at quick build approaches. So this is an opportunity to provide infrastructure relatively quickly and not necessarily waiting for some of those major infrastructure replacement projects to come online, and to really find ways to be efficient and to provide improvements, but at a low cost. And this is a tool that a lot of cities around North America have been using recently to build active transportation infrastructure, in particular, using some of these interim lower cost materials like you can see on the right. These could be things like installing some flexible posts in the road to provide physical protection, using concrete barriers, the photo in the middle, but adding some decorative elements to make sure they're attractive as well. And then finally, the last bullet, beyond quick build approaches, really looking to leverage partnerships with other agencies and leveraging all available grant opportunities. There's quite a lot of grant opportunities available from senior levels of government to help with active transportation and other initiatives to reduce greenhouse gases. So many opportunities out there to help minimize the city's share of capital projects. So that's a summary of the transportation plan, and look forward to any questions or comments you might have. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions or comments from council? Councillor Eadie.
We're going to take this up in the regular meeting as well, so I'll save some of what I have to say for that time. I do want to say that what's obvious, and that is that there's a lot of work that goes into putting something like this together. And I reflect on being involved in developing the 2030 plan a number of years ago and how exciting it was because it was such an aspirational document. But at the same time, feeling like, that skeptical, ghost on the shoulder saying, this is never going to happen. There's too much here. I kind of have the same feeling here about this one. But I think that the benefit is that it's a framework and it's a plan that's in place. And from this point, you can begin to consider those ideas that are in there that are really good, that you can implement in combination with some of the things that we have to do anyway. So I think we're very much better off having something like this in place to refer to and to move forward on the basis of than we would be if it didn't exist. So I appreciate the efforts and the expertise that went into this. It makes for a really interesting read, and I may have some more to say about it later.
Excellent. Any other comments? Hearing none, thank you very much. Appreciate your joining us this evening.
Great. Thank you very much.
All right. If there's nothing else, council, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn to the regular council meeting. Councillor Randawa, Councillor Eadie. Any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? It is carried. I will then call the regular council meeting of July the 24th to order. You have in front of you the agenda. There is a small addition, several additions to the previously published one, and that is the addition of the June 2023 Development Activity Report in the consent agenda, as well as three development variance permits, 2314, 2315, and 2316, which will be added as items 6, D, E, and F. With that, I'd entertain a motion to adopt the agenda. Councillors Eadie, Councillors Forrester, any further additions? All in favor? Any opposed? It is carried. We'll move on. Then there is an opportunity here for public comments. We have one member of the public in the room. If there's anything on the agenda here that you would like to come and comment on, you're more than welcome to do that at this time. I think the microphone is on. Yeah, oh no, it's on. Okay, thank you. And as always, introduce yourself.
My name's Toby. I come from Toronto about 10 or 12 years ago. And from the agenda, I believe that we're talking about transportation and the demolition of some buildings. The creation of cities in Canada was at a time that transportation was very different, and the construction of buildings was very focused on what we had at the time. And so the alleyways between the buildings and the streets and thoroughways were not as wide as they should be. My suggestion is that the setback for all new construction, as we find space all over the place apparently these days, that we create a further setback in order to accommodate new transportation initiatives, and to go beyond that and ensure that in the building code it mentions accessibility, which I don't see it, and we take an opportunity and create green roofs. Um, the There's so much that should be discussed, not just in council but throughout the public, to create placemaking for people to be encouraged to meet each other and interact and on issues that they're interested in, and it really starts now, just like it could have when we started this country. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate that. I won't call again because there's only the one member of the public in the room. And with that, I will move on to the consent agenda. So you've got the consent agenda there in front of you. There's a number of reports that are worth at least pointing out. We have the monthly fire rescue report. There's the report with regards to the DMAF funding, which I'm going to ask actually that Mr. Buchan, that you have somebody speak to that. There's the financial variance report, which is certainly worth going through. I'm not suggesting we go through all these things tonight, but I'm just drawing the public's attention to these reports. They're worth reviewing. There's the development activity report that's in there. All worth, in my view, spending a little bit of time reviewing. Dr. Buchan, let me have a motion, first of all, to receive the consent agenda. Councillors Cunningham and Councillors Skelton Morvan. Dr. Buchan, would you report to us on the DMAF funding application? I think, easily one of the most significant potential turning points in the community's future.
Thank you, Your Worship. I will say a few words and then I'll ask Director Pucci to give Council a little more information about it. But let me start off by saying the application to the federal government under their disaster mitigation fund has been submitted. And this is for $82 million of federal funding to go with the $65 million that the province has given us, and in order to get that $82 million, as council is aware, the city has to contribute as well, and that would be made up in large part by the $45 million of loan authorization bylaws that are out now. Without the loan authorization bylaws, we don't get to fix the problem, and the problem is critical. This has taken a great deal of work to get to this point, to the point that Director Pucci could send in the application, and I would say that it's all being masterfully managed by Director Pucci, and it's profoundly important for this city at this point in its history. So with that, I'll ask Director Pucci to speak to a little more detail about what's being submitted.
Director Pucci.
Thank you, and thank you for the kind words, Dr. Buchan. So I think it's important to start the story back when we had the Soul, so the emergency back last Christmas. That was really the jumping off point where we were looking at the system and actually how fragile it is. From that, we were able to put together an infrastructure replacement strategy and a report that identified 26.3 kilometers worth of water line that was past any reasonable life. It was high risk of failure and high likelihood of failure. We've had two different construction estimates completed by two separate companies, and both came in at approximately 130 million for just the water. We then canvassed against the federal government and provincial government, and the provincial government answered quite quickly with 65 million, which is half of what the 130 million was for just the water. When we looked at it a bit more and we looked at the funding available through the federal government, there was the Disaster Mitigation and Adaptation Fund. We felt that this was a very good place for us to put this project. But when we looked at that, we also looked at the vintage of the combined sewers that would be the same vintage as the water in these areas, which is about 100 years old or more. And we realized that that if the water was in this sort of state, that the sewer would be there as well. Plus, we have an administrative directive that says that we have to separate those systems. So when we looked at that and we worked with the federal government, we put together an application that had a full ticket price of $205 million. That is $130 million for the water portion of the 26.3 kilometers, and the remainder of that would be separation of sewer that was required to meet current standards of the day. We used the money, as Dr. Buchan was saying, from the provincial government as part leverage money, and we also are hoping that we have a successful program with the city under the AAP to provide the remainder with a small shortfall that we will be working on funding to have the full ticket of $205 million. And then at that point, we will be able to get all of that critical infrastructure replaced, which also means better assets at grade. In some areas, we can probably increase parking. In some areas, we can look at putting in active transportation. In some areas, there may be opportunities for new utility to put in, like underground hydro or new PNG lines and things like that. So we're working with all those service providers at these corridors to see if there is complementary services that we can do at the same time. Ultimately, we are seeing our system fail at a very rapid rate. We just this past couple days had a break, and that break happened on one of the 100-plus-year-old pipe. And so that is a critical piece of infrastructure that we need to change, and we will be changing that piece out. So, you know, we have really good accuracy, really good data on the pipes that need to be changed, and those pipes need to be changed immediately in order for us to be successful. Thank you.
Yep. Questions or comments from council about that? I think it's been well stated over and over, but I'll say it again. The numbers aren't sort of pulled from thin air. $205 million is the cost of the overall project, for which the federal government would only fund 40%, which comes to $82 million. You add the $65 million from the province, and you have a gap of about $58 million, some of which we will cover with borrowing. At least we need to say we're able to cover with borrowing in order for the federal government to even say yes to the 82. And that is why at a previous meeting of council agreed to go ahead with the borrowing, subject to the assent of the voters through an alternate approval process. And it's just really worth pointing out that without the ability to do that, that $82 million would shrink. And we wouldn't have the money to do the $205 million of work that needs to be done. And so these things are all interlinked. And yet, having said that, and we said it when the bylaw was approved by council, it's our hope that with continued fundraising, we can find ways to raise that money. We have time. Once the project starts, we still have time. But we need to be able to make the commitment now. And so we're hopeful that we can raise through other sources of funds. And in a perfect world, we wouldn't have to borrow a dime. I think that's a little ambitious, but certainly we'll do everything we can to keep that borrowing to a minimum. And so I just think it's probably in the life of this council, this 4-year term, this will be the most important single piece of work that's conducted, and both in terms of acquiring the funding and then the 3 years of pain and suffering it's going to take to put this in. And again, I need to forewarn the public. It will be very disruptive. You do not dig into that much to 26.5 kilometers of roads and pipes and tear up streets and put in temporary water lines and block people off from getting to their house for months and months and months on end on a 3-year cycle. Anyway, I just think it's so important, and I never want to miss the chance to make sure people understand what we're up to. Anything else in this basket of items on the consent agenda that you might want to ask a question about or draw attention to? Hearing none, I'd ask for all in favor. Any opposed? It is carried. We then move on. We have a report from the Director of Development Services regarding the Prince Rupert Transportation Plan, with a recommendation that Council approve the Prince Rupert Transportation Plan as included in the attachment 1. And I note that that's available on the website. It's a very lengthy document, 300 plus pages. And so for those of you that, like Councillor Adey, are looking for exciting weekend reading. And then the second part, and that Council directs staff to advance the actions identified in attachment 1 through the mechanisms described in the report as budget and resources allow. Can I have a motion to that effect? Councillor Forster, is there a seconder? Councillor Skelton-Morven. Dr. Buchan, did you want to speak to this or have anyone speak to it?
No, Your Worship.
Okay, the report will speak to itself. Members of council, comments. Councillor Adey.
As advertised, I might have a couple more things to say. Just to repeat my respect for the amount of work that went into it. As I went through it, I realized fairly quickly that, we're not going to be able to slice and dice the whole thing in any reasonable time, nor should we try. It's a document, it's available to the public, and I would encourage people who are interested to put some time into having a look at it. I do want to just kind of shortcut a couple of points, though. On page 82, there's the implementation plan. There was a slide in the presentation that kind of summarized that. But there's some highlighted things there that I think are worth looking at. The first point is that this is just one step in improving the transportation system in Prince Rupert. It, arguably the first step. And achieving all of it to be realistic is extremely expensive and therefore in the immediate term prohibitive. And I think we have to understand that. That doesn't mean that we don't support it, or I don't support it. It just means that I understand that not all of what's in there is achievable in the immediate term. They also make the point that it's flexible and it's a living document. So for those who may react with, oh my gosh, what are those people getting us into now? In fact, there's nothing prescribed here. This is a document from which we can draw as much or as little as we choose to based on our current realities. It does say, and I'll quote it, the city will need to review the feasibility and desirability of each infrastructure project. So in other words, it doesn't commit us to anything. but it provides a framework, and I think that there's some really good ideas in there that will help us moving forward, just as the 2030 document helped us move towards an official community plan. I think this can, these things can work in tandem. And we will need to review it. Where I think some of the weeds are the suggestion that we incorporate short-term priorities into the 5-year financial plan. This is challenging because there's a limited revenue pool, as you've just finished talking about the limited revenue pool and all the different places that money needs to go. So I think the opportunity here is that as we go through the work that we must do, and hopefully we're successful in securing the funding to do the work that we must do, when you tear up a street, then put it back together again, that's where the opportunity is. And I think that's, having this document in hand streamlines the process of deciding what to do when you put a street back together. And although we'll be doing a lot of tearing up of streets, that by definition means we'll be doing a lot of putting back together. So I think that's where the optimism can come from. I just, as a point of interest, I found the maps really interesting. There's 17 of them. They address different aspects of the plan. Public transit, pedestrian movement, road networks, and so on. And I think that in those maps you find maybe the easiest way to envision what could happen here if we were able to implement as much of this plan as possible, and that's where you get excited, because you realize it could have actually quite a significant impact. So I'm to the motion, I'm in favor of adopting the plan. With the cautionary tale that we understand that it's aspirational, and we'll take what we can and do what we can.
Excellent. Any other comments? Councillor Niche.
Basically along the same lines. I mean, the reality is that if you asked us tomorrow to approve any of these projects on this transportation plan, we would have to say no. It's just not a reality. It's a plan that was paid for through a grant, and it is a big plan. It's a lot of pages of a lot of different ideas and a lot of different maps. I don't feel that we're in any situation to do anything other than, when we are tearing up a street and we are putting it back together, that we may be able to throw in certain portions of this. So that being said, I'm not trying to take away from the report itself. The reality is that I don't see us being in any financial position to do much in this transportation plan.
Councillor Cunningham.
I tend to agree with Councillor Nice. It's a great wish list, and even when we're putting the streets back together, you just explained how people are going to be inconvenienced, and we're going to be wanting to put that street back together and get to the next street. And by adding more work, it's just not going to work. And a lot of this, we're talking about ride hailing and things like this. Right now, I don't think that's something we really need. I also think when you start looking at transportation by air, water, and road, we have no control over them. It's an airport, ferries, things like this that we have very little control over. Great Saturday, Sunday reading if you really are bored. I suggest people read it. It's a great document and but I'm just worried that right now our needs are under the ground, not above the ground. And I really think that most of our attention and efforts and finance and funding are going into the underground. And this is just stuff that we would like to see, but at the same time, it's going to be difficult in our financial position to do much of it. It's a great report, but it lacks one thing: the cost of some of these things. I would love to have seen even a little bit of the cost of it, and I believe it would be in the millions and millions of dollars. And that's just something that we can't entertain right now. We're struggling just to put what we really need in the ground back together. And our staff has been working flat out to find the funds for that. To start finding funds for other things is just tapping our staff out even more.
Dr. Buchan.
Your worship, the gravity of our current infrastructure challenges is certainly evident in the comments that council is making. I completely understand that and encouraged by that understanding, in that we are focusing our efforts where they need to be focused, because a failed water system and sewer system means that we have a failed city, which impacts everybody's livelihoods and property values and so forth. So we are focused on the right area, but we're good at doing more than one thing at the same time. And what this strategy does, and it is aspirational, as is 2030, as is the OCP, it lays out a framework for a better future. And it lays out the framework that achieves many values and many important goals in the most effective way. Having a document like this allows us then to be informed when we speak with the Ministry of Transportation. It allows us to speak with other government agencies in an informed way about what we want for our infrastructure. It gives staff direction in terms of where they focus, and we're very good at this, as is evidenced by all the grants that we get, where we focus our grant applications, where we focus our efforts in trying to put things back better within the budget that we have. So I take this as more than just aspirational. I take this as informing how we conduct our work to be as productive and beneficial as possible going forward. And I'm convinced that we will be able to achieve a lot of this in our efforts over the next decade. And by the time we're ready to review this, I think that we'll see that we have I'm being optimistic, and I think justifiably so, we'll have achieved a lot. So I think it's an important document, and I appreciate the work that Director Pope and our consultant Brian Patterson have done in this. I think it sets us up very nicely.
Thank you. Councillor Forster.
So Dr. Buchan said many of the things far better than I would. I wanted to just bring it to everybody's, just reflag it, that passing this motion doesn't mean that everything in there is going to be done, and that suddenly we've delegated budgeting to putting all of these into place. As Dr. Buchan said, it's more than aspirational. It gives the opportunity to apply for grants. And so then when opportunities come up and it makes sense, we can hopefully do some of the things in there. An example that comes to my mind, if we're already ripping up the roads and it's part of also our accessibility plan to have better sidewalks, it makes sense that we would do that. So I think it just sets us up better. Thanks.
Excellent. All in favor? Oh, were you? Yeah, go ahead, Councillor Randall.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, just want to say, like, this is a great report, and for future councils or staff, it's a guideline for them, right? Where we can go next 10 years, 5, 10 years.
Yeah.
So it's a great report, like you said, like it's not possible without money, right? But it's a great report.
Yeah, excellent. All in favor? Any opposed? It is carried. All right, the next item is a report from the corporate administrator. It's a remedial action order for 741 3rd Avenue West. And because this is got legal implications, I'm actually going to read it exactly as it sits in my in front of me. And it's fairly wordy. I'm just warning those at home that may be listening. The recommendation is that council direct staff to proceed with a remedial action order under Section 73 of the Community Charter, whereby the City of Prince Rupert will proceed with building removal located at 741 3rd Avenue West, legally described as Parcel B, BV, as in Bravo Victor, 18042, Block 32, Section 1, District Lot 251, Range 5, Coastal District Plan 923, that's PID 025-584-006, with the costs of removal placed on the property taxes for said property. And that council direct staff to proceed with a remedial action order under Section 74 of the Community Charter, whereby the City of Prince Rupert will proceed with the bus and vehicle removal with the costs of the removal placed on the property taxes for the said property. And that council directs staff to provide notice to the property owner in accordance with Section 77 of the Community Charter. And that council agree to that reconsideration of these orders may be made in writing within 14 days of the notice provided under Section 77 of the Community Charter, and that no reconsideration notices are received, if no reconsideration notices are received within 14 days of the notice provided by staff is directed to proceed. Staff are directed to proceed with the remedial action orders immediately as requested. Can I have a motion to that effect? Councillor Sneed and Cunningham. For those that don't understand all of what was just read, this is what is commonly known as Rosie's, both the burnt property and the vehicles that are on the property. All right. Any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Carried. It's in case anybody's wondering, and you're only just listening at home, it was the rush of a couple counselors to be the ones to move and second to this. It's causing a little bit of levity in the room. All right, I've got another one. Report from the corporate administrator remedial action order for 1127 and 1133 Second Avenue West.
11:20.
What did I say?
This one says 1122. This one says
It's been altered. 1127 is the actual address. There, sorry, I've got a red edition here, and this would be what is more commonly known, I think, as the Angus Apartments for those that would be listening at home. But I'm going to read again everything. That council directs staff to proceed with a remedial action order under Section 73 of the Community Charter, whereby the City of Prince Rupert will proceed with the building removal located at 1127 and 1133 Second Avenue West, legally described as lots 18, 19, 20, and 21, Block 27, Section 1, District Lot 1992, Range 5, Coastal District Plan 923, PIDs 012-028-746, 012-028-754, and 012-028-762, and 012-028-771. With the costs of removal placed on the property taxes for the said property, and that council directs staff to provide notice to the property owners in accordance with Section 77 of the Community Charter, and the council agree that reconsideration of these orders may be made in writing within 14 days of the notice provided under Section 77 of the Community Charter, and that if no reconsideration notices are received within 14 days of the notice provided, staff are directed to proceed with the remedial action orders immediately as requested. Can I have a motion to that effect? Councillor Forrester, Councillor Niche. Any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? It is carried. We have 3 development permit applications, all of which are recommendations to proceed with statutory notification. I'll begin by reading item D, which is a report from planning regarding DVP 2314 for 108 Rudderham Place. The recommendation is that council proceeds with the statutory notification process for development variance permit DVP 2314 for 108 Rudderham Place. A motion to that effect. Councillor Cunningham, Councillor Randhawa. Any discussion, comments, or question? All in favor? Any opposed? It is carried. We have a report from planning redevelopment DVP 2315 for 640 8th Avenue East with a recommendation that council proceeds with the statutory notification process for development variance permit DVP 2315 for 6408 Avenue East. I'll entertain a motion to that effect. Councillor Cunningham, Councillor Skelton Morvan. Any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? It is carried. We have a report from planning regarding development variance permit 2316 for 618 Ritchie Street. Recommendation that council proceeds with the statutory notification process for development variance permit DVP 2316 for 618 Ritchie Street. Can I have a motion to that effect? Councillors 80, Councillor Randawa. Any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? It is carried. I'm not sure that it needs to come under business arising, but I think it's worth commenting that in closed council meeting earlier, based on report from staff and the city manager, council passed a resolution that we will host the 2005 NC 20. Thank you. What did I say? 2005. Wow. Great drugs, whatever was going on. 2025 NCLGA here in Prince Rupert. We do not believe there's a budgetary impact, and in fact, there's actually funding through NCLGA to help make that happen. And with that, I would entertain any comments or questions from members of council. Councillor Forster.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Some time ago, we had a delegation from PERS come and speak to us about some of the challenges they're experiencing. I'm wondering if at a future council meeting we could have an update on that.
A report from staff. Dr. Buchan.
Your worship, we can have a report on the next council meeting.
Excellent. Thank you. Councillor 80.
On the theme of public notifications, we've just passed, well, I guess dialogue with the public. We just passed 3 DVPs that go to public notification. I think we've experienced some turbulence around that process recently. So I think it's worth just, I would like to spend just a minute talking about that interaction with the public. That public notification process with regard to people's initiatives with their property is really important. I hope that the public attends to it and where they can provide some input. I also think there's another place in our meetings where we have an opportunity for the public to come forward and make comments and ask questions regarding items on the agenda. I think ironically there were no questions tonight, but sometimes there are. And I want to be nuanced in how I talk about this, but because I think there's an opportunity there to ask questions that perhaps don't necessarily warrant a response in a formal sense, but sometimes the questions do. So I'm interested in ensuring that people who come and ask questions, where it's appropriate that those questions receive some answers, that we endeavor to do so in an endorsed or formalized way. So I'm going to leave that as a comment. And specifically, as an example of the kind of thing that can come up, I entertained a concern from a resident regarding the bridge at the Salt Marsh. When you walk down from Arabisque and you're kind of opposite Naga, sorry to former Councillor Moreau for that. There's a bridge there, and if you're riding a bike, for example, and you're 8 years old and you go very fast, there is an opportunity there to achieve a spectacular and probably rather damaging head swan dive into the rocks and the water below. So the question that the resident was asking was, were we going to have a look at that bridge and maybe make some adjustments there? So through the mayor, I'm wondering if I could direct it, I think at Director Pucci, to see if there's a response there.
Yeah, turn to Dr. Buchan, but Director Pucci.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. So the staff have identified that as an issue. We actually identified it about 2.5 to 3 months ago. We had a decision at the time to use regular steel or what's called weathered steel. That's the steel that is the bridge is made out of. It's got a patina on it. We decided that this is a brand new feature. We wanted to use the patina steel, not knowing that it takes a few months to order that type of material. The material got here actually earlier this week, and we are having our welder make it a priority to put it in. So it actually was already on our list to do, and it will be done as a priority item for us. Thank you.
Great.
Okay, thanks.
And Dr. Buchan, I didn't know if you were wanting to respond to the formalizing of answers process.
Your worship, but my first, I guess, observation on that is that section of the agenda is for public comments. It's not a question and answer period. That doesn't mean that we don't take note of matters that we can follow up with and do so judiciously. It's an opportunity for people to speak to council before council deals with the item and share their views.
Right.
That's the intent. But sometimes within comments there are questions, and where appropriate, we do try to follow up.
Yeah. Councillor Forster.
That just sparked my memory. At our last council meeting, we had some members of the public come and talk about the adult swim.
Yes.
And then we brought that into comments from council and asked the questions. And I heard that the schedule did change. I heard from quite a few members of the public that weren't even in this meeting who reached out and expressed a great deal of appreciation for city staff making that change. So just wanted to pass that on.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No, absolutely. And I think in truth, and I could be wrong, but probably the right approach to staff might have actually solved that even quicker than coming to council. And so, the last thing we want to see is that every time the member of the public has a concern, they wait to somehow get on a council agenda. We have great staff who are really receptive to good ideas, and that's the place that we want to obviously send people the first time. And I want to echo what Dr. Buchan said. The intention in putting that on the agenda, and it's even stated, it's a public comment time so that if you're opposed or if you've got a concern around a particular thing that council's discussing, you can let council know that before the decision's made. We work pretty hard actually to build an agenda where there aren't sort of gotcha questions nobody looks good when questions can't be answered immediately. We would love to, if we know in advance that something's going to be asked, we can come very well prepared and inform the public. And so what I would like to think, and I think it's been talked about, but the developing of some kind of frequently asked questions where some of these, rather than just having it answered once and then answered this again when the next person has the question, is it should just go onto the website as a building reservoir of, yeah, we've answered that and here's the answer, right? And we can be referring people to that. Anyway, any other comments or questions from council? Hearing none, and knowing that we won't meet formally for another month, let me wish you and the residents of Prince Rupert a good and healthy and happy summer holiday, and I'd entertain a motion to adjourn. Councillor Skelton Morven, Councillor Cunningham, all in favor? Any opposed? It's carried.